In modern economic history, it is hard to find a business model with a track record as disastrous as this one. Nearly 100% of these projects exceed their initial budgets with an average cost overrun of over 170%. Yet every 4 years, mayors, politicians, and heads of state throw themselves into the most fiercely competitive bidding war on the planet. Why would a country willingly sign a contract practically guaranteed to bring tens of billions of dollars in debt, leaving its citizens to pay it off for decades to come? The real answer is not in ticket sales, television broadcasting rights, or national pride. Hosting the Olympic Games is actually a massive gamble on real estate infrastructure, construction speed, and geopolitical positioning perfectly disguised under the banner of global sportsmanship. The mega-event hosting industry does not have a fixed price tag. Depending on political ambition and existing infrastructure foundation, we can divide Olympic investment into 3 main tiers. The first tier is the reuse model, with budgets floating under $10 billion. This is the least risky approach. The defining feature of this tier is that organizers strictly say no to building massive new structures. They maximize the use of 90 to 95% of their existing stadiums and infrastructure. The classic examples are Los Angeles 1984 and Paris 2024. Money in this segment is primarily allocated to security technology, broadcasting, crowd management systems, and complex logistical operations. The biggest advantage of this approach is that the host city is not left with rusting, abandoned facilities after the event ends, while completely minimizing the risk of inflation in construction materials. The second tier is the urban upgrade model, with costs ranging from $10 billion to $20 billion. At this level, cities use the Olympics as a catalyst to force the central government to quickly disperse funds for infrastructure projects that would normally take decades to approve. The characteristic of this tier is that the sports event budget is blended into the long-term urban planning budget. For example, a polluted and dilapidated industrial area like Stratford in East London received funding for a comprehensive cleanup. They built thousands of new apartments for the Olympic Village, which were later converted into commercial residential areas alongside direct rail links to the city center. The city accepts a short-term deficit on its balance sheet in exchange for the synchronized development of a quarter of its urban area. The highest tier is the power display model, with unimaginable budgets soaring to $40 billion or even over $50 billion. At this level, financial profit is no longer the objective. Host nations use the event to reposition themselves on the global economic and political map. Everything is built from scratch, from airports and high-speed rail networks to giant sports complexes with monumental architecture. Sochi 2014 is a textbook example where they virtually leveled and rebuilt an entire coastal and mountainous region just for the event, featuring incredibly expensive railways and cable car systems. The hallmark of this tier is extreme decisiveness in public spending and a mindset willing to accept mega projects regardless of massive future maintenance costs, as long as it generates the most magnificent television frames broadcast to billions of viewers worldwide. Many people mistakenly believe the biggest financial barrier to hosting is the cost of building stadiums. But the reality is, the cash burn starts long before a single brick is laid. The first hidden cost is the bidding cost. Just to be considered by the International Olympic Committee, a city must spend between $50 million and $100 million merely to draft proposals, hire international consulting firms, design 3D architectural plans, and run diplomatic campaigns. The paradox here is that this massive sum of money can completely evaporate without yielding any practical value if the city loses the bid. Next is a completely unique legal barrier known as the blank check guarantee. When signing the contract with the governing body, the host government is strictly required to pledge in writing that they will cover 100% of all cost overruns. The licensing organization takes zero financial risk if the project goes over budget, which means the entire public financial system and the taxpayers of that country become the ultimate risk-absorbing shield. Another massive hidden cost is security. Following historical moments of instability, Olympic security has morphed into a miniature military operation. Deploying tens of thousands of police officers, military personnel, intelligence networks, and cybersecurity systems usually consumes an additional $1.5 billion to $2 billion of the budget. Finally, there is the white elephant curse, a term referring to massive but useless structures. The maintenance cost for an 80,000-seat stadium or a specialized bobsled track can reach tens of millions of dollars every single year. This drains the local municipal budget for decades, even though there are almost no equivalent events held there ever again. This is the most crucial part to understand the irrational nature of the Olympic economy. If you look at this event as a commercial business, its operating model looks exactly like a ruthlessly designed franchise system where the parent company keeps all the profit and the local franchisee bears all the risk. The International Olympic Committee acts as the parent company. They hold the rights to one of the most valuable intellectual properties on the planet, the Five Rings logo. Their revenue engine is powered by the two most lucrative resources, which are global television broadcasting rights and top-tier sponsorship contracts. These sponsors are massive multinational corporations holding monopolies in their specific categories, such as a single credit card company or a single beverage brand granted the global right to associate their logo with the Olympic rings. The parent organization retains the vast majority of revenue from these sources. Their revenue in a 4-year Olympic cycle easily tops $7 billion. This model creates a staggering profit margin because they completely control the global cash flow without having to spend a single dime on pouring concrete, paving roads, or laying the foundation for any stadium. Meanwhile, the direct monetization mechanics for the host city are severely restricted. They are only allowed to generate revenue from ticket sales, merchandise, and much smaller domestic sponsorship deals. This total direct revenue rarely exceeds the $4 to $5 billion mark. When weighed against the tens of billions of dollars poured into construction, the direct profit margin for the host nation is usually a massive negative number. So why do cities still rush into this race? The counterintuitive insight here is that the real profit of the Olympics for the local government does not come from the sporting event itself, but from a time compression effect in urban planning. Imagine a mayor wants to build a new subway line. Under normal conditions, this project requires 20 years of public debate, land clearance bidding, and fighting pushback from residents. But once a city wins the Olympic bid, everything completely changes. The Games create a literal life or death deadline on the international stage. Land clearance laws are relaxed and emergency national budgets are funneled directly to the local government. That 20-year subway project is forced into hyperspeed construction to be finished in just 7 years. The athlete villages are instantly commercialized after the closing ceremony, sold off as luxury apartments or social housing. The city is essentially making a profit by borrowing the pressure of an international event to bypass government bureaucracy, shrink approval timelines, and modernize their core infrastructure in a third of the normal time. Inside the massive machinery of an Olympic Games, all financial operations are strictly divided into 2 independent accounting systems. This is an insider operational technique designed to protect the image of the event. The first machine is the local organizing committee. Their responsibility is strictly limited to running the actual weeks of the event. They handle surface-level costs like printing tickets, serving millions of meals, casting medals, organizing the opening ceremony, and installing sports equipment. Thanks to direct revenue from tickets and local sponsors combined with the use of tens of thousands of unpaid volunteers, the organizing committee almost always reports their financial results as breaking even or turning a slight profit. However, the second machine is the true center of the debt, the non-Olympic infrastructure budget. All costs for building new airport runways, expanding harbors, bridging rivers, and upgrading telecommunications are pushed onto the public investment portfolio of the central government or the city council. When an Olympic Games is declared a financial success in the media, it is usually a presentation trick, where people only look at the green balance sheet of the organizing committee while completely ignoring the tens of billions of dollars in debt that taxpayers are carrying in the long-term infrastructure portfolio. In the academic world of project economics and public administration, this phenomenon is called strategic misrepresentation. To easily visualize this process, it is like a person deliberately quoting a home renovation at half the actual price to get their family to agree, knowing full well that once the walls are torn down and the foundation is dug up, everyone will be forced to spend more money to finish the house rather than living in the rubble. This term refers to urban planners intentionally creating irrationally low-cost estimates while inflating economic benefits during the bidding phase so the project easily passes political barriers and gets public approval. They know for an absolute fact that once the project breaks ground, international contracts are signed, and budgets overrun, the government will have no choice but to inject unlimited funds to protect the national face. This misrepresentation is not an accidental calculation error, but a systemic operational mechanism of the mega-project industry. To clearly see the dual nature of this economic model, we need to analyze two polar opposites in the history of Olympic operations. The most classic failure case study belongs to Montreal 1976. The mayor of the city at the time, Jean Drapeau, confidently made a famous statement claiming the Olympics could no more run a deficit than a man could get pregnant. That assertion later became one of the most bitter forecasting errors in public management history. Instead of using existing infrastructure, Montreal decided to build a mega stadium with a slanted tower and a highly complex, unproven, retractable roof design. Due to worker strikes, poor management, and raw material inflation, costs spiraled wildly out of control. As a result, the stadium did not even have its roof finished when the opening ceremony took place. Montreal was left carrying a massive debt of over $1.6 billion. The root cause of this collapse was arrogance in project management and the pursuit of unrealistic high-risk architectural monuments. The consequence was that local residents had to pay a special tax for exactly 30 years, finally clearing the debt of a 2-week party in 2006. The lesson is crystal clear: never turn short-term events into an excuse to test high-risk architectural mega-projects without a viable payback plan. On the contrary, the most outstanding success case study is Los Angeles, 1984. This is the only Olympics that completely altered the core financial structure. At that time, following a series of financial and security crises, almost no city in the world wanted to host except Los Angeles. This monopoly advantage allowed the city to force the licensing organization to accept an unprecedented condition. The city government would bear absolutely no financial responsibility, and all risks would be absorbed by a private operating committee. Under the leadership of businessman Peter Uberroth, they applied the ultimate rule of zero new builds. They reused the exact stadium from the 1932 games and utilized university dormitories as the athlete village. At the same time, the organizing committee invented the modern exclusive sponsorship model, limiting the number of major brands and forcing them into bidding wars to become the sole sponsor in their product category. As a result, Los Angeles 1984 generated a net profit of over $230 million, leaving behind a massive youth sports foundation that is still operating today. The core lesson is to privatize the risk, maximize negotiating power, and strictly reuse existing assets. To summarize, let us put the two hosting philosophies on the financial scale through two specific calculation scenarios. The first scenario is the traditional build, where a city decides to project power by building massive amounts of new infrastructure. The initial capital investment is about $15 billion, where $5 billion is allocated for direct operations and $10 billion for hard construction. The direct local revenue collected is about $6 billion from tickets, licensing, and domestic sponsors. The actual operational cost equals $5 billion, making the direct financial net profit a negative $9 billion on the master balance sheet. Furthermore, the hidden maintenance cost drains an additional $50 million a year to maintain abandoned facilities. The payback period becomes a public debt burden lasting 20 to 30 years, with the slim hope that public transit projects will create indirect macroeconomic growth momentum. The second scenario is the sustainable model, applying the cautious financial philosophy of Los Angeles 1984 or Paris 2024. The initial capital investment is roughly $5 billion for operational costs plus about $5 billion for light upgrades to essential existing infrastructure, bringing the total budget to around $6.5 billion. The direct revenue hits $7 billion by thoroughly exploiting commercial revenue streams and saving heavily on construction costs. The direct financial net profit achieves a surplus of $500 million. The payback period is immediate right after the event ends. The city gains a small financial surplus and improved transit systems without leaving any tax burden for the next generation. The economics of hosting the Olympics proves a harsh truth about global mega projects. hosting the Olympics is not really about the business of sports. It is the most ruthless real estate and geopolitical sales pitch in the world, where the one standing on the podium is usually the one paying the heaviest price, and the true gold medal in financial management only goes to the cities that know how to say no to new construction.